Hi, I'm Eric Linden, and I never planned to be a landlord. Honestly, it fell into my lap when my Uncle Jerry passed away 5 years ago. He left me his small apartment building with 4 units in a decent part of town. Nothing fancy, just solid brick construction from the 1970s, with good bones and minimal maintenance issues. Uncle Jerry had owned it for nearly 30 years and managed it himself, keeping detailed records of everything from paint colors to which tenants paid on time. When I inherited the building, I was working 60 hours a week at my construction management job and raising 2 kids with my wife Sarah. The last thing I needed was more responsibility, but the mortgage on the building was almost paid off, and the rental income could help put my kids through college someday. So I decided to keep it and give landlording a shot. 3 of the tenants were great people. The Johnsons in Unit 1 had lived there for 12 years. Mrs. Patel in Unit 3 for 7 years, and old Mr. Wilson in Unit 4 for almost 20. They all paid on time, kept their places clean, and called only when something legitimately needed fixing. I got to know them, respected them, and they made my new side gig as a landlord pretty smooth. Then there was Marcus Green in Unit 2. Marcus moved in about 6 months before Uncle Jerry died. According to the rental application, he worked as an IT consultant with decent income. He passed the credit check with a score just high enough to qualify. Everything seemed fine on paper. I remember sitting at Uncle Jerry's kitchen table, reviewing the application while he dozed in his recliner, the oxygen machine humming rhythmically in the background. "Looks solid enough," I'd said, and Jerry had merely nodded, too tired to argue. How could we have known? But from the moment I took over managing the building, Marcus became the bane of my existence. The first month under my ownership, Marcus's rent was 5 days late. No call, no explanation. I remember staring at the empty mailbox, my stomach knotting with anxiety. This was my first real test as a landlord. And I was already failing. Sarah had warned me that Uncle Jerry's building would be more trouble than it was worth, but I'd insisted we could handle it. When I finally reached him by phone, he had a story about a client payment being delayed and promised to pay in full the next day, including the late fee outlined in his lease. He sounded apologetic and professional, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. "I really appreciate your understanding, Eric," Marcus had said, his voice smooth as butter over the phone. "It's been a crazy week with this client. You know how these big corporations can be with their payment processing? Just don't let it happen again," I'd replied, trying to sound firm but fair. "The mortgage doesn't wait, you know?" "Absolutely," he'd assured me. "This is a one-time hiccup. You'll have the check tomorrow, I promise." That night, Sarah had found me hunched over the kitchen table, recalculating our budget for the 10th time. "It's just 5 days," she'd said, massaging my shoulders. "Don't lose sleep over it." "It's not just the money," I'd explained, rubbing my temples. "It's the principle. If I let him slide now, what message does that send?" Little did I know how prophetic those words would become. That became the pattern. Every month, a different excuse, a hospitalized relative, a banking error. His car broke down and he couldn't get to the bank. Each excuse was delivered with such conviction, such seemingly genuine distress, that I found myself almost believing him despite my better judgment. Each time he would wait until I was about to start eviction proceedings, then suddenly the money would appear, usually in the form of a cashier's check handed over with profuse apologies and promises that it wouldn't happen again. "My mother's in the hospital," he'd say, eyes downcast, voice catching. "I've been by her side all week, barely sleeping." Or, "You won't believe this, but the bank somehow applied my direct deposit to someone else's account. I've been on the phone with them for hours every day trying to straighten it out." After the 3rd month of this, I started dreading the first of the month like it was tax day. I'd wake up in cold sweats, wondering if this would be another month of chasing Marcus for rent. Sarah noticed the dark circles forming under my eyes. "You need to talk to someone about this," she'd suggested one morning, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to me. "Maybe a property management company? And pay them 15%? I'd snapped, immediately regretting my tone. "Sorry, it's just, we're barely breaking even as it is." But it was more than just the late rent. Within weeks of me taking ownership, Marcus started reporting minor maintenance issues constantly. A dripping faucet at 11 p.m., a slight discoloration on the ceiling that he was worried might be black mold, the dishwasher making a strange noise. My phone would ring at the most inconvenient times. During dinner, in the middle of Sarah's birthday celebration, once even while we were making love, and I'd feel my heart rate spike when I saw the building's number on caller ID. As someone in construction, I take building maintenance seriously, so I always responded promptly. "I know it's late," Marcus would say, not sounding sorry at all, But this faucet drip is keeping me awake, and I have an important presentation tomorrow. I'd arrived to find a barely perceptible drip that could have easily waited until morning, but there I'd be at midnight under his sink while he hovered nearby, offering unwanted advice. "You know, I read online that you should really replace the whole fixture when this happens," he'd say, scrolling through his phone as if researching it in real time. "Otherwise it's just going to happen again, and then you might have water damage to deal with. That could be really expensive." Yet somehow, whenever I fixed one thing, two more problems would appear. And Marcus always insisted on being present when I made repairs, watching me like a hawk and asking endless questions about building codes and landlord responsibilities. "I was reading tenant rights forums," he'd casually mention, leaning against the door frame while I replaced a perfectly functional smoke detector that he claimed was beeping all day long. "Did you know that in this state, landlords need to provide 72-hour notice before entering a unit unless it's an emergency? That's so interesting." The implication was clear. He was arming himself with knowledge that he could use against me. After these visits, I'd return to my truck and sit there, sometimes for ages, trying to calm the rage building inside me, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. By the end of my first year as a landlord, I started to realize this wasn't just bad luck. Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. The breaking point came when I finally had to file for eviction after Marcus went 2 full months without paying rent. Those were the darkest days. I'd lie awake at night, calculating how long our savings would last if his rent never came. Would we have to dip into our daughter's college fund? Would the bank eventually foreclose? The scenarios spun wildly in my head until dawn broke, finding me exhausted and no closer to a solution. The day before our court date, he showed up at my house, my personal residence, not the apartment building, with a cashier's check for the full amount plus late fees. He had this smug little smile when he handed it over. The sight of him standing on my front porch where my kids played, where Sarah planted her spring flowers, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the autumn air. How long had he known where I lived? Had he been watching my family? "Sorry for the trouble," he said. "I've been going through some stuff. Won't happen again." His eyes told a different story. They were cold, calculating, almost amused. This was a game to him, and he was winning. I felt violated in a way I couldn't articulate, knowing he had brought his manipulation into my sanctuary. "How did you find my address?" I demanded, my voice shaking slightly. "Oh, it's public record when you own property," he replied casually, as if commenting on the weather. "I wanted to make sure you got this right away, wouldn't want any misunderstandings in court tomorrow." I wanted to refuse the payment and proceed with the eviction, but legally I had to accept it. The case was dismissed. That night I installed a security system, cameras, motion sensors, the works. Sarah thought I was overreacting, but she hadn't seen the look in Marcus's eyes. She hadn't felt the quiet threat in his presence. "He's just a difficult tenant," she said, watching me check the camera feeds for the 3rd time before bed. "Not a criminal." "There's something wrong with him," I insisted. "This isn't normal behavior. Normal people don't deliberately torment others like this." 3 months later, we repeated the same dance. This time I documented everything meticulously. I served proper notices, filed the paperwork correctly, and was confident we'd finally get our day in court. I'd spent hundreds of dollars on legal advice, stayed up late studying landlord-tenant law until the words blurred before my eyes. I'd done everything right this time. The morning of the hearing, Marcus filed an emergency motion for continuance, claiming he needed time to gather evidence of alleged code violations in his unit. When my attorney called with the news, I was in the middle of a job site. I had to excuse myself and sit in my truck, hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. "He's saying what?" I practically shouted. "There are no code violations. I've fixed every single thing he's ever reported." "Doesn't matter," my attorney explained wearily. "He's alleging potential structural issues that would take time to document. The judge errs on the side of caution with these things." "So he just gets to stay for free? Again?" The injustice of it burned like acid in my throat. "For now," came the reply, "but we'll get him next time." I hung up and slammed my palm against the steering wheel so hard it bruised. One of my workers glanced over, concern on his face, but I waved him off. How could I explain that a man I'd never wronged was systematically destroying my peace of mind, my financial security, perhaps even my marriage? The judge granted him 2 more weeks. The day before the rescheduled hearing, Marcus paid in full again. This cycle continued for almost 2 years. I consulted 3 different attorneys, all of whom told me the same thing. As long as Marcus ultimately paid before final judgment, there wasn't much I could do. He knew the system and exploited every loophole. It's like he studied the law specifically to find its weaknesses, I ranted to Sarah one night after another failed eviction attempt. My blood pressure had been creeping up at each doctor's visit, and now I was on medication at 42 years old. Maybe we should just sell, Sarah suggested again, her own face lined with worry. This building is killing you, Eric. And take a loss after everything we've put into it? I shook my head vehemently. Besides, who would buy it with him in there? We'd have to disclose the situation. Sarah didn't respond, just silently gathered the dinner dishes. We were talking less and less these days, both of us worn down by the constant stress. I caught her looking at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part concern, part something else. Disappointment, maybe? Was she starting to see me as a failure? But the rent delays were only part of the problem. Marcus had also become an expert at manufacturing maintenance emergencies that required immediate attention. Like the time he called at 2 a.m. about a water leak that was flooding his apartment. The phone's shrill ring had jolted both Sarah and me awake, adrenaline instantly coursing through my veins. Sarah had groaned and pulled the pillow over her head as I fumbled for the phone. When I arrived 20 minutes later in my pajamas, I found a slow drip from a supply line under his sink with maybe a cup of water on the floor. He pointed to it dramatically and said, "I was afraid the whole place would be underwater by morning." This couldn't wait until daylight? I asked incredulously, kneeling on his kitchen floor in sweatpants and a hastily thrown-on jacket, my hair still mussed from sleep. "Water damage can happen quickly," he replied with wide-eyed innocence. "I was just trying to save you money in the long run." I noticed he was fully dressed, not in night clothes, as if he'd been waiting up specifically to make this call. On his counter sat an open bag of chips and a paused video game on his laptop. This hadn't interrupted his sleep at all, only mine. Driving home in the dark, my exhaustion was tinged with a growing sense of helplessness. Was this my life now? Jumping at Marcus's every call, neglecting my family, my health, my business? Then there was the mysterious electrical issue where circuits kept tripping. After 3 separate electrician visits, at $95 per hour, we discovered that Marcus had been plugging multiple space heaters into the same circuit, despite the lease specifically prohibiting this. "I don't understand," the electrician had said, scratching his head as he inspected the 3rd space heater tucked behind Marcus's sofa. "These things are clearly what's overloading the circuit." "I had no idea," Marcus replied, the picture of confusion. "They were gifts from my sister. I didn't even think about the electrical load." But I had seen the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes when the electrician presented me with another bill. It was costing me money, time, and sanity, exactly what Marcus wanted. That night, I found myself researching how to prove tenant harassment of landlord. Until well past midnight, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating our bedroom where Sarah slept fitfully beside me. The search results weren't encouraging. The law simply wasn't designed to protect landlords from tenants. It was always the other way around. The worst incident happened last winter. Marcus called the city housing inspector to report that his heat wasn't working properly. I received the call from the inspector on my job site, where I was already dealing with a subcontractor who had failed to show up for the 3rd day in a row. The timing, as always with Marcus, couldn't have been worse. When the inspector arrived, the temperature in the apartment was indeed only 63 degrees, 2 degrees below the legal minimum. I was issued a citation and ordered to fix it immediately. "This is ridiculous," I'd protested to the stone-faced inspector. "The furnace is brand new. I replaced it last year." "All I know is the temperature reading, sir," he'd replied, unimpressed by my frustration. "You need to bring it up to code within 24 hours or face additional penalties." My hands were actually shaking as I signed the citation acknowledgement. Another mark against me, another official document suggesting I was a negligent landlord when I'd done everything by the book. I felt a crushing sense of injustice, so powerful I had to turn away for a moment to compose myself. Marcus stood in the background, arms crossed, a concerned expression perfectly arranged on his face for the inspector's benefit. What the inspector didn't know was that Marcus had partially blocked the heating vents with furniture and closed the dampers halfway. I only discovered this when I came to inspect the furnace, which was working perfectly fine for all other units. When I pointed this out to Marcus, he just shrugged and said, "I didn't realize that would affect the heat. I moved the furniture there last week to make room for my new TV stand." "You didn't realize blocking the heat vents would affect the heat?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. "Are you kidding me right now?" Marcus's face hardened almost imperceptibly. No need to get aggressive, Eric, he said, his use of my first name feeling like an invasion. I'm not an HVAC specialist, how would I know? Common sense, I snapped, past caring about maintaining a professional demeanor. This is deliberate and you know it. A dangerous smile played at the corners of his mouth. Careful now, that sounds like you're accusing me of something. I could consider that harassment. The word hung in the air between us, harassment. The legal implications made my blood run cold. One complaint from him about my behavior, and I could find myself on the wrong end of a restraining order, unable to even enter my own building. I left without another word, slamming the door harder than necessary. In my truck, I gripped the steering wheel and let out a sound that was half shout, half sob. I was trapped and Marcus knew it. By this point, the other tenants had started giving me sympathetic looks whenever they saw me at the building. Mrs. Patel once quietly told me, "My cousin is a landlord too. Some tenants just know how to work the system." Mr. Wilson was more direct. "That young man in Unit 2 is nothing but trouble. I can hear him laughing on the phone sometimes, bragging about how he's living rent-free." I tried everything. I offered him cash for keys, a lump sum payment if he would move out voluntarily. I'd scraped together $3,000, money we couldn't really spare, desperate for any solution. "Think about it," I'd urged him. "A fresh start, first month's rent somewhere else, security deposit, all covered. You could move someplace nicer." He took the money, signed the agreement, and then simply didn't leave, forcing me to go through the eviction process again, which he delayed as usual. When the agreed-upon move-out date came and went, I'd shown up with a U-Haul and helpers, ready to assist with his move. Marcus answered the door in lounge clothes, not a single box packed. "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding," he said casually. "I'm not quite ready to move yet." "We had an agreement," I said, the words strangled in my throat. "You signed papers? You took my money?" "Well, I've reconsidered," he replied with a shrug. "You'll need to follow the proper eviction procedures if you want me out." "You can't just keep the money!" My voice had risen, drawing a curious glance from Mrs. Patel, who was retrieving her mail nearby. "Sue me," Marcus said quietly, so only I could hear before closing the door in my face. After almost 3 years of this nightmare, I was at my breaking point. The stress was affecting my health, my marriage, and my day job. Sarah suggested selling the building, but I hated the idea of letting Marcus win. Plus, I'd be passing this problem to someone else, and the property value was significantly lower with a problematic tenant in place. That's when my brother-in-law Tom, who works in marketing, came up with an idea over beers one night. "What if you could make him want to leave?" Tom asked. "Like really want to leave?" "I've tried everything," I said. "Cash offers, renovation plans, even offering to help find him a nicer place." No, Tom said, leaning forward. "You need to give him something he thinks is better, something he thinks he's getting over on you." And that's how Operation Housing Lottery was born. Tom helped me create a legitimate-looking sweepstakes mailer that announced, "You may already be a winner in the regional home giveaway." It had official-looking seals, fine print, and a unique winner confirmation code that needed to be called in to verify. We set up a prepaid phone line and created a basic website with a stock photo of a nice suburban house. The contest rules stated that the winner would receive a rent-free home for 2 years, after which they would have the option to purchase at a significant discount. The catch? The mailer was only sent to one address, Marcus Green, Unit 2. When Marcus called the number, my college roommate Jason, who now works in sales and has the perfect phone manner, confirmed that he was indeed the grand prize winner. Jason explained that a local real estate development company was using this promotion to build community goodwill. "We'll need to schedule a viewing of your new home," Jason told him. "And of course, you'll need to be ready to take occupancy within 30 days of acceptance." Marcus was suspicious at first, asking detailed questions about the contest and the property. Jason had been well prepared with answers about how winners were selected from utility customer databases, and that the home was part of a new development that wanted to ensure their first phase was fully occupied to attract more buyers. We arranged for the viewing at a house that belonged to Tom's cousin. He had recently renovated it for sale and was just waiting for the paperwork to go through. Perfect. My sister played the role of the perky real estate agent, showing Marcus around the 3-bedroom house with a fenced backyard and updated kitchen, a significant upgrade from his 1-bedroom apartment. I wasn't there for the viewing, but my sister reported that Marcus walked through the house like a kid in a candy store, measuring spaces and talking about where he'd put his furniture. He asked several times about the catch, but my sister assured him there was none, just standard terms requiring him to maintain the property and not sublease it. The development company needs positive publicity and happy residents, she explained. They're investing in community satisfaction. Marcus signed the acceptance paperwork that day. According to the terms, he would need to take occupancy on May 1st, exactly 28 days later. For the next few weeks, I held my breath every time my phone rang, expecting Marcus to call and say he'd figured out the scam, but instead, he actually started packing. Mrs. Patel mentioned seeing him carrying boxes to his car, and Mr. Wilson spotted a small U-Haul in the parking lot one evening. The most shocking moment came when Marcus approached me in the hallway and said, "I'll be moving out on May 4th. I've got a better situation lined up." He couldn't hide his smug smile. "Really?" I said, trying to sound casual. "Where are you heading?" "Just a better opportunity, much better than this dump," he replied. "I'll leave the keys on the counter." I nodded and said, "I'll need to do a final walkthrough for your security deposit." I was trying to play it cool, but inside I was doing cartwheels. May 4th was a Monday. I obviously knew he would be doing a runner on May 1st, so I took the day off and arrived at the building early on Friday morning. Marcus's parking spot was empty. Mrs. Patel intercepted me in the hallway. "Your problem tenant left this morning," she said, "very early before sunrise. My grandson was getting water when he heard the truck." I ran to Unit 2 and found the door unlocked. Inside, the apartment was empty except for some trash and a few worthless items. On the kitchen counter lay the keys and a handwritten note. "Sucker, guess I got the last month free after all. Don't bother sending my security deposit. Consider it a parting gift for being such an easy mark. Marcus." I stood there reading the note over and over, feeling a mixture of relief that he was finally gone and anger at his parting shot. Then I remembered the second part of our plan. I immediately called a locksmith and had the locks changed. I also took dozens of pictures documenting the condition of the apartment, which had damage well beyond normal wear and tear. There were holes in the walls, carpet stains, and what looked like deliberate scratches on the hardwood floors in the kitchen. Then I called Tom. "He's gone. Time for phase 2. "Absolutely," Tom said. "Jason already sent the final confirmation text with the move-in time of 3 p.m. At 2:30 p.m., I parked my car across the street from the address we'd given Marcus. It was a great house. Only one problem for Marcus. It had been sold to a young family with 3 kids. Oh yes, I guess there was a second even bigger problem for him, as he was about to find out. He hadn't actually won this house or any house. Tom sat in the passenger seat and we waited. Just after 3 p.m., Marcus pulled up in a rented moving truck. He was smiling broadly, wearing a button-up shirt, dressier than I'd ever seen him, and had a woman with him who I'd never seen before. Maybe a girlfriend he was trying to impress with his amazing contest win. We watched as he confidently walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell, expecting to be met by the competition organizers. The new homeowner, a woman in her 30s, answered with a baby on her hip. Even from across the street, we could see Marcus's confusion. He gestured at the house, showed her something on his phone. The woman shook her head. Marcus became more animated, pointing at the house and then his truck. After a few minutes, the woman's husband came to the door. More animated discussion. The husband pulled out his phone, presumably to call someone. Marcus paced on the front lawn, checking his own phone repeatedly. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up. The officer spoke with the homeowners first, then with Marcus, who showed the officer his phone and some papers. The residents showed the officer a big folder of official-looking documents. The officer shook his head at Marcus, who was waving his arms all over the place, raging. Eventually, the officer moved Marcus off the property, onto the sidewalk with a stern warning. "Should we go?" Tom asked. "Not yet," I said. "I need to see this through." We watched as Marcus made more calls, becoming visibly more agitated with each one. The numbers for the contest were already disconnected, and the website was down. There was no one for him to call, no one to complain to. He did try to call me several times, but my phone was on mute. Surely he couldn't possibly think I would take him back. After almost an hour, Marcus slammed his hand on the moving truck, got in, and drove away. The officer stayed a few minutes longer with the homeowners, then left as well. "That's it?" Tom seemed disappointed. "I thought there would be more of a showdown." "This is better," I said. "He has nowhere to go, no one to blame but himself, and no legal recourse. The only thing he won was paying for a moving truck to haul his stuff nowhere." I later heard through Mrs. Patel's nephew, who worked at a local motel, that Marcus had checked in there the same day. Apparently, he'd given up his previous apartment entirely, confident about his contest win. I did eventually receive a threatening email from Marcus claiming I was behind the fraudulent contest, demanding compensation for his moving expenses and temporary housing, as well as the house promised in the competition, or its equivalent in cash. I simply forwarded it to my attorney, who sent a formal response noting that 1. We had no idea what contest he was referring to. 2. He had voluntarily abandoned the apartment and left a note explicitly stating he didn't want his security deposit returned. And 3. We had extensive documentation of the property damage that far exceeded the security deposit amount. We never heard from Marcus again. I did send his security deposit accounting to his last known email address, showing how the entire amount was applied to damages, with an additional $1,250 balance remaining. That bill was never paid, and I chose not to pursue it. Having Marcus out of my life was worth far more than that amount. The unit was renovated and rented within 3 weeks to a retired teacher who pays her rent 5 days early every month and brings me homemade cookies at Christmas. As for the building, I decided not to sell after all. With Marcus gone, managing the property became what it should have been all along, an occasional responsibility rather than a constant stress. The rental income is now consistent, and I've been able to make some long-delayed improvements that all the tenants appreciate. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Marcus, if he found another landlord to torment, or if he learned his lesson. Part of me feels a little guilty about the deception, but then I remember the 3 years of manipulative chaos he put me through, and the guilt fades pretty quickly. The irony isn't lost on me. Marcus thought he was the clever one, always gaming the system and living by his wits. In the end, his belief that he could get something for nothing, that there was always an angle to be played, was exactly what brought him down. He was right about one thing, though. Somebody was definitely a sucker in our relationship. It just wasn't me. Hope you enjoyed Eric's tale about outsmarting Marcus. I'd love to hear your stories of people challenges and how you overcame them. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to take you for a ride? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of triumph over adversity.